let's have a look at this week's Parsha. This week is a special Parsha because one of the special aspects of this week's Parsha is that it marks the halfway point of the Torah. It is the perfect midpoint of the 5 books of Moses, of the written Torah. We have 2 midpoints of the Torah in this week's reading. We have the midpoint of words, and we have the midpoint of letters. Right? So if you would count every letter of the Torah, you would arrive at the center, the midpoint in this week's Parsha. And if you would count every word of the Torah, you would arrive at the center in this week's Parsha as well. It's a little bit off. It's a page or 2 different, but still in the same reading. The Torah reading also represents, it seems to me, in that, once we direct our attention to this middle point, it seems to me that the Torah reading then also represents another midpoint, which is that the first half of the reading describes the inauguration of the Tabernacle, of the Mishkan. If we read Leviticus, this week's Torah reading starts Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1, and it is the 8th day, which is the day in which the tabernacle is the first day of services in the tabernacle. Moshe Rabbeinu conducted the service for 7 days as a way of kind of practicing or training, demonstrating. And on the 8th day, he inducts Aaron and the other priests into the service. And then, so that's one half. And then the second half of the Torah reading describes the food that is kosher. So we have the laws of kosher animals. That starts from Leviticus chapter 11 and until the end of the reading, describes the animals and birds and fish that should be considered, and even critters that are considered kosher and those that are unkosher. So if we think about it in those terms, we also see this kind of midpoint at which the Torah represents 2 halves. There's 2 aspects to the Torah. One is the table of God, the tabernacle, our spiritual service, our attempt to connect with God. And the other is sanctifying our human lives, sanctifying the human table, so that we are connecting with God in the most prosaic of actions. So we want to be both connected to God in our worship, as well as in our human endeavors. Let's have a look at the actual midpoint in words. And the first spot is Leviticus chapter 10, verse 16. It's on page 447 in the Encino Chumash. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 16. Parak Yud Pasuk Tet Zayin. And it actually describes a pretty tense moment in this inauguration service. It's a moment of anger. And there is some dispute here between Moshe and the two sons of Aaron, who are serving as priests. And he says to them, and they have made a sin offering, which was part of this service, and they have completely burnt the sin offering. And Moshe gets angry, and he says, "Why did you not eat?" Verse 17. Why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? Because this is the duty given to you, to carry the sin of the congregation and to forgive, to bring atonement for them before God. You should have eaten it as I commanded. And Aaron responded to Moshe, and he said, "Behold, this day they have brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before God. And there have befallen me such things as these. And if I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have been well-pleasing in the sight of God?" The sense is that Aaron is saying, we are not yet ready. We have not yet been inaugurated such that that we can bear the iniquity, that we can bring atonement for the Jewish people. This is the sin offering for us, in which we need our atonement to be uplifted so that we can come to that level. Okay, that's the context. But since we're talking about the Hebrew words of the Torah reading and the Hebrew words of the Torah, such that this is the midpoint of Hebrew words in the Torah, let's read the Hebrew words. Verse 16, Pasuk Tet Zayin. V'yei se'ir hakchatos, darosh darash Moshe, v'hinei soraf. And regarding the sin offering, or the goat for the sin offering, Moshe darash, diligently inquired, and behold, it had been burnt. And so the word darash, diligently inquired, or inquired, he inquired, represents the midpoint of the Torah in words. The second, right, that's I guess it's in between the two words, is the midpoint. And I think it's fascinating that this is the phrase that's the midpoint of the Torah. Perhaps it represents the essence of the Torah. Perhaps it represents the central point from which everything else grows and flows. Diligently inquire. But there are two words for inquire, for seek. Darosh, darash. It's referred to twice. And so it seems to me that what we might be saying here, and I kind of getting this sense as I read some of the writings of the students of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Torah is nothing until a seeker meets it. Darosh means to seek out. It means to study. It means to explain. And to find out, to question. And perhaps we're being told that at the center of the whole Torah must be an inquiring mind or an inquiring heart, a person who is a spiritual seeker, who wants to know the truth, who's on a quest to find something higher, something deeper. It also seems to me that there are two quests, there are two derishos, two things that have to be found. One is, what does God want from me? And the other is, who am I? Or where am I? And that question, the Eight Zihir Chatas and the sin offering, Darosh, question myself, where is my sin offering? What am I up to? Where am I? Who am I? What's going on with me? Darash Moshe v'hinei soraf. Where is the fire of Moses? Where is the transcendence? Where is the truth? So we both have to find our own moment. We have to be honest and true in finding our own inner moment. And we also want to be in touch with what is the objective truth? What is the beyond that we're trying to find? And it seems that these two things are also mirrored in the two themes represented in our Parsha. One is the inauguration of the temple, discovering the ritual service. How do I come close to God? And the other is, how do I sanctify myself? And the context here also is, very much in that nexus where we're talking about the two types of sin offerings. One is where the priest offers atonement on behalf of the Jewish people, in a sense, representing the abstract holiness, embodying the ideal person, so that all of us should aspire to be that. And by connecting with the Kohen, we too are connected with that transcendent truth and that eternal purity. And then there is the fact that even the Kohen needs atonement for him or for himself, and therefore it has to be burned. And that the Kohen is being true, is kind of there's a quest to sanctify and elevate himself in order to properly represent the other Derisha, the other side. The other, we come to the other middle, and the middle of the Torah in letters talks about something which must not be eaten. And this is chapter 11, verse 42. Page 453 in the Sansino. So let's read the context. Every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth is a detestable thing, it shall not be eaten. Whatsoever goes upon the belly, and whatsoever goes on all fours, or whatsoever has many feet, even all swarming things that swarm upon the earth, them ye shall not eat, for they are a detestable thing. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any swarming thing that swarms, neither shall you make yourselves unclean with them, that you shall be defiled thereby. So we're talking about not eating critters insects, snakes, lizards, and other such things that swarm upon the earth and go upon their belly. The words, whatsoever goes upon the belly, kol holech al gachon. If you see in the Hebrew, there in the word gachon, the vav is bold and enlarged. And that's to indicate that it is the middle letter of the Torah. Now, isn't it interesting that the middle letter of the Torah is the word belly? The middle letter of the Torah is the letter belly. And if we think about it, the Torah started with a snake. And now at the very center of the Torah is another snake.
Which verse is this?
This is Leviticus 11, verse 42. And so I think the difference between the middle of the Torah in words and the middle of the Torah in letters is that the middle, right? If you think about it, there is the perceived middle, and then there is the true middle. When you count the middle of the Torah in words, you're talking about the experience of the reader. Because we experience at least conceptually, we experience the text in words. And so the middle word would be the middle of the text. But the middle in letters is something that you have to count without paying attention to the content. So it's not going to be about my experience of the text. It's going to be about the text per se. What is the text as it is? And so the middle letter of the text represents the essence of the Torah, and not necessarily so that the words represent the work, and that's why we talked about the focusing on being a seeker and focusing on trying to come close to God and trying to be authentic and true and to really confront where we are, right? Those are the two derishos, the two inquests. But the essence of the Torah is to confront the snake, to confront the serpent. And that's the middle of the Torah in letters. Kol holech al gachon, that which goes on its belly.
What's the word for belly?
Gachon. This is the word for belly when referring to a snake. A person's belly would be different. So yeah, the point here is that the Torah is meant to cancel, to counteract the snake, which symbolizes the reason why the snake is seen as the hallmark of evil in the Torah is because the snake sheds its skin. And you have the sense that this snake, this animal, has a veneer, that there is a veneer and there's an externality about this creature. that isn't true.
Like a pig.
Similarly, right? The pig puts out its
Phony, in other
its
words.
yeah, it puts out its hooves to show, it sits with its hooves sticking out forward, them displaying its kosher sign, while its inner truth is not chewing its cud, the other kosher sign. Um, so so that's the idea of let's say when we're talking about the food, right? Eating food shouldn't be like the snake, in the sense that we have to be in touch with the inner truth of what the food is, which is that it's a creation of God in order to bring sustenance. If we look at it like a snake and we only see the veneer, we focus on the gourmet, right? We focus on the craft of the food and the art of the food without being connected with its purpose. And it's also, I think, associates with what we talked about earlier, the mitzvah of acknowledging the flowering fruit trees, which is that when we are acknowledging the beauty, it is of a fruit tree, of something which we'll eat, and we're also connecting that with God's creation. We're being mindful that this is something which God intended for us to experience and to meditate on. What does that experience mean? But a skin that can be shed and discarded is one that lends itself, is a lifestyle that lends itself to sin, in which, because if I'm thinking about doing food without connection to its purpose, I begin to separate the means and the end, and then all kinds of things become possible. It doesn't matter anymore why I'm eating or why I'm engaging in business. Let's say, for example, the idea of a person who is doing business for its own sake, may, because they enjoy the thrill of the chase, they are likely to become caught up in, they're vulnerable to be caught up in unethical practices. Whereas when a person is trying to engage in business because they want to do good in the world, so then they have to ask themselves, is this good? If they're directed towards doing good in the world, so that they always have to hold on to the question of, am I doing good in the world? And then my business practice must therefore be ethical. We also have to, of course, there is another question of the means justifying the end, where I become so obsessed with my meaning that my meaning overrides my practice, and that's another problem, right? That's still the snake, the separating the inner life from the outer life, such that what I'm doing on the outside might be evil, but on the inside it's with good intent. So both of those things are not good. Holech al Gachon also reminds me of Winnie the Pooh, who walked following his belly. So we're supposed to walk upright with our head above our heart, above our more baser organs that are more autonomic, that they operate on a more instinctive level. So there we have it, the essence of the Torah. Seek yourself and seek out God. And at the center of the Torah is if you do this, we will hopefully merit to counteract the snake and to place our head above our belly.